Como se dice, I read it. I don't believe it. Well, we're huge. I mean, it's called bring out college. It's in the middle of the country. In the town. That bring out, and the college is using its name to bring out college. It's a small little visualized college. It's 12,000 souls.
Because you are almost the first disciple, the first writer I meet.
Okay.
We don't. Oh, okay. Because I said you're the first one, and you're. I told you you're the first writer and you're the first student, not me. Damn good songwriter.
She's really published.
¿Te ves? Eres un dragaño. ¿Sabes que es un dragaño? Person who follows their years.
Oh,
¿Te ves bien?
no la que te lo dice.
¿Qué fumas? No. You exercise a lot?
No, not really. I used to be a gymnast.
Me too.
We
So
probably,
we share them in common. Yes.
So-
Gymnasts for some reasons.
but yeah, I never really exercised. My dance movements were wake up in the morning. All right, now, you want to start or you want to wait?
You wanna wait for?
I'll wait for Alfonso.
Hey, let's wait a little while.
No, we're all being recorded, but like.
Well,
It's not gonna be-
it sounds like it's not too. But once the mic picks it up, it'll be, people can really hear what you're saying. Right now, you're. Tell me about
Oh, God.
what neighborhood?
The last time we were supposed to meet up, right, I lived in but now I actually live,
And look for your.
I had an opportunity that last there's a lot of stories up there. I like the vibes. And I always say that. There were many times. It's clear. The first place that I got, got into. Oh, yeah. That I have.
Como que te perdieron. Nah, like they got lost.
My mom lives in.
You
Yeah.
grew up with that.
We lived there for 2 years.
I know, but that was a bad.
I know.
That's just a long time. Things that
We expensive is very congested.
we Latino. Really hard. It's for you to have to get up.
This video is about 2000.
I'm gonna tag you in that on the live if you want to share it.
Oh, yeah, please. Yeah. Where is it? When I realized I was not the last time, when I went to Paris. You got an answer, it started speaking French. I started speaking you French.
I know.
I wish I could say I know speaking French today.
I think we should start without.
Ah, shit, I forgot. You can't hear it on the fucking speaker. Stupid ass Zoom. Zoom sucks for that. Yeah, it won't connect to the speaker.
Well, what if I bring a Bluetooth? They use them come?
No, it doesn't work on that either. Go what? Oh,
The other.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Rearte. I am Viva Padilla, the owner of the space and also a co-host of Notes from the Chicanx Underground. Notes from the Chicanx Underground is actually a project that me and Matt have been thinking about doing for a while, which is basically a series of conversations with Chicano thinkers and also compas, people that are in solidarity with Chicanos, to come and speak and have like a informal conversation about art, poetry, literature, just kind of like having these conversations in kind of like a loose way. So that is also very like timely in terms of the topics that will be discussed. So we were proud to present this and having Gabriela as our first speaker, as our first guest today. We're gonna be doing this probably like every month or so with different speakers, and we're gonna be live. And the idea is basically to have these kind of conversations that are very important, that are important to our community, and create a published chapbook at the end of it with the conversation as a transcription. So we're hoping that after this, we're gonna be able to quickly do something like that here. As you know, or you don't know, I'm an independent press. So we're hoping to come out with a whole series of chapbooks with different people and conversations. And put these chapbooks in different bookstores around Los Angeles and San Diego, San Francisco, wherever we go, chapbooks with us. Because we feel like there's a big lag of literature in all of California, really, I mean, or beyond, you know. But when we're talking about LA, LA has so many Mexicans, immigrants, bilingual Chicanos, Pocho Chicanos, all kinds of people living here that don't have access to uh, their own people's literature, their own people's imagination. The political thought of our own people is really missing there's a void, there's a big void in LA. So me and Matt like are trying to really bring this about in different spaces, but really focusing in on LA because, you know, this is one of the few spaces that is very openly Chicano. And I'm the only Chicana-owned bookstore on this side of town. You won't find any other LA bookstore that's owned by a Chicana. Yeah, so so
That's the deal.
I don't want to say too much, but I will just go ahead and present to you your host. His name is Charlie Rose. I'm kidding. So this is Manzadillo. Manzadillo is a Chicano political poet, one of the best well-known poets here in Los Angeles, born and raised in El Sereno. He is the co-founder of El Martillo Press, which has published people like Cesar Avelar, who is the Pomona Poet Laureate, and he works with many poets that are from the borderlands. So he does a lot of amazing work with them. He's also the literary director of the Mexican Cultural Institute, which he's been doing for a while. And he travels extensively as a Chicano representative. And I'm proud to be his friend. We've been friends for about almost, what, 12, 15 or more years. I don't even know. So he's really been like my literary hermano. So I'm proud to have him here. I'm proud to be working with him. And all the people that he brings in are amazing, incredible people. So don't doubt anything that we do, because when we put our minds together, it just becomes great. So today is just the first part of the series that we're working on. But Matt is a great host, and he's gonna take it away, and he's gonna take you right in. So thank you, Gabriela. Let's give them a round of applause.
Can we have a more for round of applause for Vita Pedia, the owner of Rearte Libro de Vientos Press, which I'm sure we'll be hearing much more about in the very near future. Slip oil heads best bet.
In the spot.
So we're really honored to beginning this new series. This new series is going to be Notes from the Chicano Underground. We're gonna, as Viva said, we're gonna be in conversation with a number of Chicano intellectuals from all sorts of walks and disciplines. It's going to be, very, there's going to be a lot of literary focus, but also, in the fine arts, as well as in academics, intellectuals, organizers, people of note, and also, people who stand, as she said, in solidarity with the Chicano movement. So we're very, very excited to launch this, and I'm very, very honored to be launching with Dr. Gabriella Gutierrez, who has been a frequent collaborator, just a real, living legend, someone who is, the author of numerous collections of poetry, as well as the editor of so many different anthologies. And I really want to open up talking to you about, what draws you to producing so many anthologies? I mean, what draws you to highlighting so many of the work of others, I mean, of our community? When you have, the ability to, write your own books and do these things, what for you? I mean, I know what is for me, but like for you, what is the, how would you express this need to put on the community?
Well, Matt, people like you. I teach Chicano literature. I got my doctorate at Stanford from on Chicano literature in Spanish and English. And I think I will stop teaching and stop writing books the day that I don't find someone who tells me, what is that? There are no books. Like, who publishes, who writes Chicano literature? And so there I am. I just won't, I used to spend like an hour with every person that did that to me. I won't do it anymore. I will not give them my time. I am so happy. I remember I found you on the internet because you were reading and you were so passionate about it. And I was looking for people for my anthology that ended up in Xochilingüicatl, 100 years of Chicano poetry. And it ended up being published in Spain. It's more than 700 pages. All the poems are translated. I translated many of them because a lot of Chicanos write in English. It's a beautiful book. It's been sold everywhere. And what pushes me to do that? The fact that I know that in the United States, we tokenize communities. We choose one, Vietnamese American you know, one Chinese American, one Mexican American, as they call us, or Hispanic, which is really offensive to me. And that's it. And then they promote that person, they give them all the awards in the world. It's always, you know, they're always trying to prove that they're inclusive and that they include diversity, but just one of us, right? And I think it's when I see people like you, Matt, I've read with Matt so many times, and he's read for my students, and everybody agrees, you know, how sensational he is. And I hope you will read a poem today too, or recite a poem. He does so much. He works in prisons. He brings poetry. I did that too, take poetry to the prisons, which is where a lot of our people are, right? And when I worked in Washington at the high security prison, Gig Harbor, which is also so difficult to get in and out because they check everything on you, your pens, your everything. And I just gave up going there because it is so difficult. They don't even, we have this inhumane system. Most of the women that were there and had gotten years in prison because one of their children died as a result of an accident, right? So they're already paying for having lost their child, who was hurt or died as a result of an accident, and them being under the influence, usually alcohol. And then they make them pay another, you know, few years, keeping them away from their other children. Yeah. So unjust, you know. So we need to cultivate those minds. We need to speak. Poetry is like song, and that's how we can get in under the door, you know. A lot of times I'm invited to read, and I read a couple of very sweet poems at first, and then I give it to them. But I like to enter with a smile. And I like them to know that we are very prolific as poets, and there's many poets in everywhere we are, there are poets, because poetry is essential to Chicanos, Mexicanos, Latinoamericanos. It's essential, it's part of our life. But as a profession, I'm so glad that I went to school in grammar school in Mexico. My parents were migrant farm workers, so I went back and forth because I got to know that poet is also a profession, right? When we ask children here, what do you want to be? You know, people want to hear doctor, lawyer, and all my students in junior high used to say, I want to be a doctor, a lawyer, but they had no idea how you would get that, or they were all the kids of migrant farm workers, you know. But I want them to say, I want to be a poet. And it's important to me that 66 poets were published in that anthology that people might not have known about. And also to give the background, the history of what we've been doing. I always say that my parents commuted back and forth from Mexico to here because the border was a porous land. The border has become this big fence now, but it used to be that for the last 150 years that I know about with my relatives, we went back and forth. So we bought thread on this side, we bought, you know, eggs in, you know, on this side usually, and then we bought leather on that side, and we bought, you know, there's certain things you bought here and there, but we were commuting. Well, they were working here, they were working there. It is not gratuitous that people from Michoacan work. All of them go to the Central Coast in California, in Watsonville, where most of the strawberries are produced. It's not gratuitous. I got strawberries from Watsonville in France, right? And in Germany. And that's our people that we're kissing. I have a poem where we're kissing their hands. So funny that all these people don't want Mexicans, but they're kissing our hands when they're eating strawberries and fruit and all the things that we make. But it's not gratuitous that they went to the Central Coast, because when you go to any town in the summer, in July and June, you go to Michoacan and you walk out in the streets of a small town and you smell it, and you can smell fresas con crema. Real strawberries, as my teacher who I visited today, my 90-year-old Chicana teacher who taught me French, she says they don't have real fruit anymore around here, so that's why I don't eat fruit. So real strawberries you smell in Michoacan, and all of the Michoacanos go to Watsonville, and what do? They pick berries. Right? It's not gratuitous that my uncles ended up in Watsonville, California, and Santa Cruz, where we pick most of the apples. They plant most of the apple orchards in California. And my father and my uncles lived next to a town called Canatlan de las Manzanas that produced apples for at least our state. So people go and work in what they have worked before, and we embellish this country. And people need to hear poetry about all these things.
So I definitely want to get to talk about your, the history, your personal history, your family's history with farm work. But before we do that, I really want to talk a little bit about, so you talk about the prisons, the work in the prisons. I'm very curious as how like they looked in Washington State versus here in California, because I'm very interested, like we talked about, going in, like you yourself as a teaching artist are like kind of criminalized. I don't experience that in every prison, but I certainly have experienced in a few, where like they going in, they search your box, they throw things out, they go that. So can you speak a little bit to like what are Washington prisons for women? What should people know about them?
I think you're doing so much more, because I know you and I know several other poets that have worked in prisons here. And I really, really think that you're doing so much more than they're doing in Washington. In Washington, I was selected, it was like the Arts Commission, and then I became a commissioner after that for the state of Washington, but it was really minuscule. It was one person going, I would go at least every month to do this work, but it was not, I don't know how it is now. This is like 15 years ago. But I will check, because I think it's important that we have, most of the women there were women of color. Most of them, and some of them were in wheelchairs, as I said, for having had an accident and lost a child. And the woman who had gone right before me, who's an incredible saxophonist, told me, be careful, because if they don't like you. So I was like, why didn't you tell me that before? Not true. I had a great time. They became my friends, and I couldn't get more hugs than I did. And they were so happy to have you there. And but I will investigate more, because I think California and programs like yours are doing so much more than we do in Washington.
Actually, I recently had the opportunity to interview some people from so Flaco Rising, and some people from Underground Scholars. They talk a lot about how a lot of these programs came out of the hunger strike from Pelican Bay. So it's the prisoners themselves that forced changes in the state of California. So that's a real important part of history. I could say that it's definitely the experience that when you go in to teach, you're told everything in society teaches you to be scared. But I was in California City, and we had a complete blackout, and the lights were gone, were out, we're indoors, so there's complete darkness, and I'm in there with two teachers, and when the lights are out, the lights come back on, and two of the teachers are holding each other like this in fear, and I'm sitting there with a pencil in each hand, like Lord of the Flies, and all the guys there, hands on the table, perfectly calm, perfectly chilled out, because that's this happens like twice a month. The lights go out, and so that was kind of like this really like wake up call for me. Like the ridiculous attitudes that we have that don't have anything to do with reality. I mean, it's, if they're there to be a part of a class, they're a program, so it's not gonna happen. But it goes to show how the criminalization of our people really embeds itself in our minds, even in our own minds.
Yes, I want to call that structural fear, just like structural racism. That there's things that, they teach you to fear. And even the people who are feared, even them, they are surprised when we're not afraid. I've had my car break down in the middle of a black neighborhood in Seattle, and I put everybody to work. Hey, guys, help me. And the guys are like, they're even surprised, but they come and help me. And they become my friends. And then we look for jobs together. So it's just about not letting these structural biases take over us. And that's part of being Chicano, because Chicanos don't only work we do work for our people. I feel I can go anywhere and get help. I couldn't get the car started yesterday to go to Beaumont it took me 4 hours to get from Monterey Park to Beaumont to see my teacher. And so these guys, I could tell they're from Oaxaca or deep Mexico or Chiapas. And this young woman, and I said, come help me. And by God, they didn't leave until they got my car started. They had things to do, but that's how I approach the world. It's a beautiful world.
It's a beautiful world. Now, speaking of structural biases, I know you got your finger, you got a page say there, and I'm definitely gonna ask you to read from this collection, but one of the seminal works that you're known for is having put together Presumed Incompetent. So when you wrote that, when you came together when you came up with this collection of Presumed Incompetent, well, I mean, for those who don't know, can you tell us a little bit about this book? I mean, I remember when it came out, it was a huge deal. Everyone was talking about it.
This is what
So tell us.
makes me famous.
tell us a little about it.
Well, I got to the university and, you think after you get your PhD and all your community went to your graduation and, you're big shot, and, you're so big. Como un pavo real, you feel so big. Then you get to the institution that hired you. In my case, they waited for me a year to get there. They insisted that I take the position. And, but then there's 6 years of hazing, right? Where you're the criada. 6 years of waiting, and there's nowhere. I would ask, everywhere, what do I need? Do I need 1 book, 2 books? Some people only needed articles, to get I mean, in psychology and in some areas to get tenure, but nobody would really tell me what I needed. It was very escurridizo, very slimy type, but, not really telling you exactly what you needed. And then I thought, well, there's nothing to guide me, no hay nada. And I'm thinking of all these new generations of Chicanas, of Chicanos, right, that are coming up, getting their PhDs, of people of color that don't know what the yellow brick road is like because their parents are not professors, right? Teaching, being a professor is not a hobby for us, like it is for some people. For some people, it's a hobby. Their parents were professors, their uncles were professors, and so they will get tenure and they know they will, right? But for us, there's no yellow brick road. So I thought, oh, then I saw a book that I submitted a paper for, he now teaches at San Jose State, Marcos Pizarro, which was called Ingrates at the Gate. That was never published. It was never published. And then I realized what was happening, that a lot of the people that were trying to tell the truth, be the whistleblowers about what happens in academia to people of color, they were being hired as administrators. And a lot of them were pulling out their papers from, I carried that book for 8 years, the first volume. This is a second volume that was requested. We had to do it. People wanted more because our book, my book changed. It changed. There's many people that have used that book in court that have said, hey, I'm not the only one. I'm not imagining this, as they usually say, right? That that's not happening to you. You think that they're treating you badly, but they're not, right? But it's, this proved, this affirmed that in fact this was happening. As my friend Connie Anthony, white Chicana, she's not a Chicana, white lesbian from Oxnard. She wrote one of the chapters for Presumed Incompetent. And she says, there's flyers that say, there's t-shirts that say black is beautiful, brown is beautiful, but there's nothing that says poor is beautiful. So the real issue was that we were coming from the working class. And that is what was not acceptable, that all these people did not want us in the academy. Because really, and we say this in Presumed Incompetent 1, the academy was made for white men. It was made to educate white men. And then white women went there to marry the white men that were already there, right? Yeah, that's what they went there for. There's a wonderful video on YouTube. I presented with her in the East Coast, Jacqueline Badalora, and she talks about the creation of white, right? In 1681, she has these little buttons she passes around because it was really in 1681 that this notion of race and who was superior and inferior came up, right? And of course, for us Mexicanos, Chicanos, we come from Mexico. And as I said, my parents have commuted back and forth forever. There's all this new blood coming in. And we drive them crazy. We drive them crazy because it never stops. The Italians stopped coming. All these other people stopped coming. They're too far away, right? But us, we just keep coming and bringing new ideas and wonderful and hard work. I mean, those guys yesterday, those Oaxaqueños would not leave me until I was, and then they had a set of recommendations for me on how to drive, right? But they would not leave me until I was okay. And so I always tell, my family, I'm okay everywhere because we're everywhere. We're everywhere. And the notion of Aztlan, this mythic homeland, as long as there's someone, not only Chicanos, people of color as well, as long as there's someone there, they're gonna help me. So we're really an enormous community. Makes me very proud.
I'm really just to follow up with the book. What was it like what was the process of collecting the essays and articles and different things? And how did that
Well, I sent a call for papers. The majority of the papers that came to me were from African American women. They were much more courageous than other people of color to submit. And Matt, for the first one, it was like 200 papers in 6 months. Yeah. Because all these people knew there was something very wrong in the way we were being treated in the academy. And that's why the book sold like hotcakes. Every library, every university library has my book because it was needed. And nobody had been, now that it is so popular and so successful, it has been a double-edged sword for me. Because, I've been hired, sometimes like in Our Lady of the Lake, I went and I gave presentations to the administrators, to the faculty, and one to the students in general. Because when there's issues. I want to talk particularly specifically to the faculty and to the staff separately, I mean, to the administration separately, because I didn't just want to produce books that were just a lamentation, ¿verdad? Un rosario de lloraderas. No, I didn't want that. I wanted solutions. So chapter 30 in volume 1 of Presumed Incompetent has recommendations for the candidate. I had a colleague at Seattle University that every time there was a faculty meeting, she was a Chicana, beautiful, beautiful Chicana, beautiful scholar. And every time there was any meeting, she would literally hide anytime anybody wanted to meet her. She would hide behind her desk until she left. And so I say that too. The recommendations to the candidate is do not hide, Talk to people, get allies, get people to help you, get people to demand that they help you, that they give you advice, right? That they mentor you. Because most Chicanos that don't get mentored, most people of color that don't get mentored are the ones that don't get tenure. Because they didn't know how to evade. We all know how to frame things. If you're in academia, if you're a scholar, if you're a person of color in academia, as I always say, you are an astronaut. Because you already got your BA, your master's, your PhD. That was a real suplicio. That was, you went through all of these hoops that you jumped, burning hoops. So you're already an incredible person. You should be treated as such. But there were a lot of papers. But then when I got the book together, that's why it took so long. Several of the people that got tenure between the process of starting and them submitting their work and the process, and getting it published, they pulled their papers. And I had to work so hard to keep the table of contents, updated.
That does make a lot of sense. Wow. You clearly want to read something.
Oh, no, I'm fine talking to you now.
No. I see you holding. Yeah.
Advertisement for, I want to advertise this beautiful anthology that just came out with San Diego State University Press. Because this has what I asked women, it's a women's anthology, Chicana anthology. I asked them to give the best piece of advice that they could to other people. So that's one part of it. And then there's short stories and there's poetry, of course. And it's a beautifully produced anthology by Bill Nericio out of San Diego State University Press.
Is it the Mexican guy?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's William Nericio.
William, yeah.
I call him Memo, so it's, yeah. But he's been around. Talk a little bit about Mestis.
I mean, I've never actually, I've never worked with, I have not yet had the honor. But, yeah, no, he puts on incredible programming. I mean, I know he had, I know he recently had Lalo and Gustavo down there. Yeah, he brings people from all over the country, a lot of just, shining examples of excellence. He kind of gathers them and brings them back down to San Diego. So, yeah, no, you definitely want to follow the work of William.
And I like that he does it with humor.
Yeah.
He does it with humor. He laughs at the, ridiculousness of some of the things that people think about us, right? As scholars, and it's just so devastating. Even now, the way that we're still presented in the media, in the series, sometimes it's more sophisticated. My son, who's 24, 25 years old, he always explains to me the intricacies of new racism. Because it's evolved. We're still there, but we're still awkward and we still don't fit in.
I think, it's really interesting when you talk about, um, the general state of racism in America. I think that in many ways, it's really turned up. In certain ways, the general society is turned down, but then elements of the society have turned way up, like way harsher than they've been, for decades. But when it comes to the particular population we're talking about, when it comes to our population, there is this question of the fact that we're like grossly underrepresented. Given our demographics, we're the most underrepresented group, subgroup within the United States. At the same time, there's also this question of misrepresentation. So you have people who pursue representation, and to get anyone on TV, to get anyone anywhere, seems like a victory, right? But also sometimes the only way you're getting in is to make a fool of yourself. And so I mean it creates this question of like how to proceed. I mean, like, because if we see us getting, into film or wherever, if it's a film or a television show, we have to, yeah, a hot Cheeto movie, we have to debase ourselves, that's not good. And if we see ourselves as like, okay, well, we're gonna become professors, and we're gonna get into the professorial class, and we're, being horrible to our own community as professors or as admin, that's not good. We're showing that we can be tough on, whatever, that's terrible. So I mean, it's just a real question. I mean, how do you proceed?
Yes, the thing that really bothers me right now in popular culture is, yes, I love the Mexicanos. But upper class Mexicanos do not represent us, right? And it's in film now that they're bringing in all of these, oh, Guillermo del Toro, and all these people that are making it in Hollywood. Oh, and they're Mexican, and they're Mexican. El otro, what's his name? Iñárritu, sí. And no, you can't do that. You have to bring people that were raised here and by this culture. And there's so many filmmakers. There's so many young Chicano filmmakers. But no, they bring the upper class, and these are wonderful guys. I love those Mexican film producers. I adore them. But we have to bring our people up there and give them credit for what they're doing, because Chicano culture is evolving thanks to all of these young people here. And so that bothers me. The question of it's not intersectional, see? No es interseccional, because we're not looking at race, class, gender, religion, sexuality, sexual orientation. We're not looking at all that. And it's happening. ¿No? Tenemos muchos trans. We have trans, people in Hollywood, but we're not giving them proper recognition, I would say. And we're not looking at social class, and that's very important. So all of Latin America, all their upper classes come over here. In Florida, all of it, they're all, and that also bothers me, Matt, because when you arrive as a Cubano from your parents were from the upper class, like Miami Sound Machine, all those people, it's very different when you arrive as an educated person with all kinds of connections than when you arrive from China or Vietnam and you don't know anybody, right? It's very different. I address indigeneity and colonization in my collection. How many Indians can we be? But we really need to look at people and ask people who represents you, not just decide. Because in general, it's a binary, at least in the state of Washington, it's black and white. And since us Chicanos are of all shades, right, in the same family, we are not black enough.
So I would say that, it's my own, I don't know, not disagreement. I think, I like the Three Amigos. I mean, I like the fact that they're out there, representing, Mexican brilliance on the world stage, but I totally agree with you. It's a completely different question. When someone talks about Chicano representation, like, well, we got Enrique, or we got this, we got that. That's a very, very, very different. It's just a different question altogether. And if you look at the numbers, I mean, it's just really quite staggering how difficult it is for so many of us to break into the intellectual field, to break into quote unquote the life of the mind. I mean, we're doing it right now, just sitting here in these chairs where we're having intellectual conversations. It's not like it's impossible to do it, but in order for it to be put on a staged, in front of with all kinds of resources thrown in it, I mean it's almost impossible.
We need to do a Teresa talk. There's a section in my book that was gonna be Teresa Talks, right, instead of TED Talks. We need to do our own because we're not being included with all the new innovative coining our terms that we've coined. Many of us have coined terms, right? And I don't have a problem with people representing Chicanos, but I think if you're making millions of dollars on a movie, you need to give back to the Chicano community, to the Mexicanos en México que están, that are needy. Hay mucha gente que necesita bibliotecas en muchos de los pueblos. Why can't they, if they're Mexicanos, then they should give to Mexicanos, that's fine, but they should give of the millions of dollars they get from representing Mexicanos and Chicanos.
One thing, speaking of like this connection between Chicanos and Mexicanos, in the audience we have Alfonso Vasquez, the director of Chicanix Sin Fronteras, and so you and I have recently for the last 2 years been part of an encuentro of poetry down there. So I know that you had gone at earlier times to Mexico City for other encuentros and for other cultural exchanges, and you had remarked on how different this experience was than the experience in the past. Could you compare and contrast some experiences we had in the last 2 years versus experiences from an earlier time?
Of course, of course. And I'm so happy that Alfonso is here. We have a few intellectuals here. We also have my friend Kang Ho and Michael Torrey, great musician. We have a room full of intellectuals. I went to El Colegio de Mexico with a beca de CONACYT when I graduated with my BA from Occidental College. And those were given to a couple of Chicanos. I think there were, I don't know how many, 6 of us from the United States that, were American born and were given scholarships by El Colegio de Mexico. However, when we got down there, it was a little bit of what institutions do in the United States now. Oh, we accepted so many Chicanos and so many people of color, and a lot of them are Hispanic serving institutions, but they have one professor, right? Who's a Latino, right? Hispanic serving institutions with hundreds, thousands of Latinos. It was like that in Mexico City. They got us down there, but they were so condescending to us. We were these brilliant kids coming from some of the best universities in the United States, who had managed to get there. I didn't even know what a checkbook was when I got to Occidental College. I came from a migrant camp. My mom thought she was moving in with me to the dorm. She said, "Oh, no, I like the dorms at Harvard better," she said. I got into 5 schools, a couple of them back east. Ay, mija, no, ese no me gusta. And all along until I realized, oh, she thinks she's coming with me. And then I thought, why not? Why does it have to be their way? My mom should be able to come with me, right? And cook for me. She was ready to make gorditas for the whole dorm when she visited. But, we had some of the best. We had Angela Valenzuela, who's now Angela Valenzuela, Emilio Zamora. Those 2 were with me with CONACYT, major scholars now who've produced many books. And these people at El Colegio de Mexico were treating us like we also visited UNAM. But for everyone, we were like, and I spoke, I was totally bilingual. The other Chicanos, some of them were not. But as I teach my students, they have to respect that, right? Respect it and is the first thing, respecting why people learned or didn't learn a language. So here we are, and we're treated horribly. And what Alfonso Vasquez has done, and Chicanos Sin Fronteras, and all the different names and hats that he has, and of course, Abril Zaragoza, several other people, Abraham Peralta, is that they've done it, something that should have been done long time ago. This exchange, what Alejandro Morales calls in his books the corridor, which is as if it were a country from LA to Mexico City. There's a Mexican corridor. And why not, When I get to LA, I know I'm in Mexico. I mean, people don't realize that, but I'm in Mexico, And so why not do that? Why not support other scholars, and work together because that's what we need to do. Something that should have been done long time ago, but that hasn't been done until now by Dr. Alfonso Vasquez and all his followers. He's got an entire cuadrilla of people working. A cuadrilla es when we pick berries, es una cuadrilla. And working hard on our behalf, working hard building this bridge that really it was there, but it was never sustained or affirmed or firmed up really with bricks. And I call bricks are the books we're all producing, right? With all these, it cannot be negated anymore. This brotherhood, sisterhood, hermanazgo, compadrazgo, So yes, it's a very exciting project. And Matt, of course, is at the center because he's been working with Alfonso back and forth. And it's very beautiful to me what one individual can do to improve relationships, intellectual relationships amongst two countries. I also think that Mexico was not ready before, and now it is, Alfonso. Because I also was invited to work in Durango at UGED, at the university, to present to all these young people that have questions. They don't understand why their parents left them to be raised by their aunt or by their grandparents. So all these issues of abandonment with people from Durango, which is the second state after Chihuahua, that come up here because we used to be the farm workers. We used to be the factory workers, We used to be, my mom worked here in LA in sweatshops, getting paid $10 a day, and she was supposed to support us with $10 a day. So it's so important that we work together, creating equity and equality for people, but also for intellectuals. And I know that's what they're doing. It's a very exciting time right now.
It's very interesting for me going to Mexico because, like most Chicanos, you go there and you're feeling like you're attempting to reconnect to something. And I did. I mean, there was a lot there that, was just, it was very deeply felt. But, when it was actually in the middle of, Culiacan, and I was just looking around and it looks so similar to Parque de Mexico in Lincoln Heights. And, Parque de Mexico is probably just based on it. So, I mean, that's probably why, but I grew up in El Sereno. I grew up in El Sereno on the border. My grandfather would take me to go feed the ducks in Lincoln Park. And so I grew up, seeing these statues, seeing these things. And to see that, it was like this feeling like I was going to Mexico to reconnect to something. But then like having this like feeling like I was always in Mexico. And so that was just really just a kind of a profound feeling. And the way it is, I mean, it's a beautiful spot, but there's a lot of tourists there. So I was around by this first, I'm almost start crying. It was like, it was like an odd place to have an emotional moment, but I felt it.
Someone would have probably come and consoled you.
Oh.
It's true. That happens. Someone is not gonna let you cry by yourself. And that happens here too. I had a guy thought, why is he heading towards me right now when I walked out of your store, Vida? And this guy was coming towards me and he grabbed me by the shoulder. And I looked up and I said, what is he doing? I knew there was a reason. I was gonna step on some poop. This beautiful Chicano in his 50s, you know, now some other lady that doesn't know the area would have thought, oh, he's, you know, coming to attack me. But I knew he was gonna help me somehow. Sure enough, you know, he was worried about my shoes. No, this is a fantastic time. I'm so excited about I'm so grateful with what we've done. I just sat across the way in La Parrilla and had lunch. And I sat and there were a couple with a little girl. And of course I started talking to them and they were two therapists who drove 45 minutes to get here and eat here and support this neighborhood. And I could tell they were highly educated Chicanos, you know. And I was so excited. Also Centroamericanos, he was half Salvadoreño. But this beautiful culture that we've created of hermandad all over California is amazing. And that's thanks to all of us, right?
Yeah, it's very fascinating also to bring up like, the Alejandro, also you brought up. It's actually interesting because during this week we had some presentations with Luis Rodriguez as well. And the teacher just published Alejandro's first novel. So this is kind of and teacher's first novel. So the Brick People, right? Yeah. Teacher's just published it recently. Really recently published a novel of his, and it's the teacher's first novel. And so it's really,
That's amazing. I have to talk to Luis I wrote several papers. One of them was just published in England on the Brick People. But I'm so glad that it was reissued with him because it's a beautiful book and the book is about precisely how there was not only Chicanos, how there was Japanese and there was Chinese and there were Blacks working with the Chicanos to build. It's in Montebello where I'm staying now. It used to be the Simon's Brickyard. And a third of Mexico exited Mexico before, during, and after the Mexican Revolution. A third of Mexico. And they thought they were escaping. I talk about that in my paper. They thought they were escaping the hacienda system, right? But in fact, they were coming over here to a reformulated hacienda system, which was here. There's a beautiful movie, I think it's on YouTube, on the Brick People. And it's about how this family, Smith, I think was their name, recreated this hacienda system and this small town where the children had to go to the schools there. It was almost like the tiendas de raya during the revolution that people had to buy from the patron. So here in Montebello, this Mexican families, Alejandro was one of them. His family, his sisters had to go to a Mexican school that was there in the Simon's Brickyard where their parents worked. And they built America that way because they were making all the bricks that built the entire East Coast. So they're there. I'm very glad it's being republished.
it's actually interesting that I wrote a poem called La Reina, and it has a reference. It has a reference both to the Simon's Brick Factory, but also has a reference to presumed incompetent. It shows how small the world is. But I actually mentioned like in the Brickyards of Mono, it says, in the poem it says, you know, she will be presumed incompetent. And then also in the later in the poem says, in the 79s built a pueblo, in the 1890s the Brickyards of Montebello built one again. So in the same poem, there's a reference to Alejandro's work, the brick people, and also a reference to presumed incompetent. I was just really just remarking on how just
It's a small world.
how small and big the world is, but I mean, and also, but also how small the world is, but how the large the scope of your work and his work is, because I wrote these lines and these poems before I ever met you, and before I ever met Alejandro. So, I mean, it just really speaks to,
Alejandro was my professor at Stanford. Alejandro was my professor. He was a visiting scholar at Stanford University. Just a beautiful man. He's a beautiful professor. So I loved learning from him. And he presented in Spain a couple of years ago at a conference I was at. And he was so sweet. We didn't get to talk, but he passed by and he gave me his movie. I have the Brick People movie, if you ever want to see it. Just that kind of camaraderismo, that kind of love that we give to each other with our books and our poems and publishing people. And Abel Salas was, he's published all of us in Brooklyn and Boyle. Just a lot of love.
so yeah, okay, well, at this point in time, I want to ask you about this book, How Many Indians Can Be? Now, you wrote this while you were in India, right? Traveling throughout India. I know that I know that Rati Saxena was one of your hosts. Rati is the director, the national coordinator of World Poetry Movement in India. And yeah, can you tell us a little bit about like what took you to India and how what was your experience like?
I love being in India. I could live there. It was like being in Latin America for me. And anybody would strike a conversation. I know that people would walk across the street because my hair was a lot longer, and people would walk across the street to see if my hair was really my hair. Because they had never met women from abroad with long hair. And they also thought it might be their hair. Because the women in India cut off their hair. And you know who wears all that hair? People in Hollywood. So the temples, they cut it off as a sacrifice. And the temples sell it to Hollywood. So they were looking under my hair. Imagine all these people around me inspecting me. But I had a great time because it was my culture. I have a poem here about candies. I walked into a candy store and it was jamoncillos, garampiñados, palanquetas, all these Mexican candies. At the Indian store, I was going crazy. Maybe I should read one that is, I'll read one that I don't think you've heard, Matt, because I always read the most salient ones, but I want you to see me in India, so very happy. So I talk about indigeneity. The whole idea of putting India and Mexico and Chicanos in one book started with my sons, actually. They're in the back seat of my car. I explain all this in the introduction. And they are arguing with an East Indian boy because we went by a totem, an Indian totem. They're in Seattle, we have several totem poles, right? And my son said to the East Indian boy, oh, esa la hicieron, our ancestors made that, right? And the East Indian boy says, no. He says, you're not Indian. I'm more Indian than you. So this discussion, and I talk about that, I theorize it here. of being more Indian or less Indian, that's the discussion. Because it's ridiculous how they, also the name Indians, right? Indios. And there's a whole polemics about that because we don't know if they were looking for India or if they were calling Indios sin Dios. Because the indigenous people were, éramos sin Dios, right? We didn't have God because we had so many gods, right? So that's the polemics. So we don't know if it's insulting or not. Um, but I want to read you a poem that is about how I see the streets in India when I arrive. Also, the one thing that there's a poem that I really love, which is about manhood. And I'll read it after this. So I'll read a couple. This is called Traffic in Madras. Madras is in the south. It's Chennai now. And I'll read it in English. ¿Está abierta la puerta? No, está cerrada. This is really, I have a real good music salsa in the back. Traffic in Madras. Was it via the English stereotypes I now understand 3 on a moped is common or normal? How do you learn to drive when the road is narrower than our life? Women in saris on the back of a motorbike sit holding on to their futures, their children spilling. There's people lining the road statuesquely. Who put the cars on the road? Red, white, and greenish garlands, almost a Mexican flag on their faces. The face of India we see in the United States, unisex, smiling, accomplished, dignified. Flowers on the tails of the bikes. Women hold the gear. They hold the rear with their garlands of jasmine and love. The rules of the road, the gas tanks traveling to certain kitchens, food, Annapurna, the goddess, the honking as a rule, not an exception. The balloons, the colors of all the saris in one billboard, golden statues with garlands, and I on the road to a song of cars. Old men without shoes walk behind their sandaled sons. Political signs on the road, bearded gurus and glassed politicians, mostly bindied women awaiting buses, yellow and blue trucks, footpath fruit stands, papayas, pineapple, bananas, cut exactly for human consumption on the roads to human consumption. Feeding fluids, love, color, life, normalizing the street of what used to be. Humans in front of the gold shops investing on their arms, the banks of the future. Never the legs, never the breasts, their midriffs bare, never the rumps, never. I want to read manhood. Because every day I was staying with my colleague's mother in Chennai. And she has a house in the town, but she also stays in a community of retired people. She is a Carnatic singer. You know what that is, Mike? They sing only with their throats. Yes. And she has all these followers, all the groupies that were following her. And I went to a couple of her performances. I saw beautiful things. I saw colors of skin I've never seen. Purple skin. And we would see these men we would also see cows walking around, which was very interesting. See, las vacas andan por ahí por la calle. And the first time I'm at a stop sign, there's an eye of a cow right here next to me. I was very surprised. But I wrote this poem because we'd see these men every day in this, next to these projects. And they had this little booths where they sold something. I didn't know what it was. It's called tasmac. It's called tasmac. And it's a little bit like tepache. It's made out of fruit. So if you know what tepache is made with pineapple, cáscara, ¿cómo se dice cáscara? The skin of the pineapple. But they were so happy and they were holding all these other men, y todos abrazados, así muy felices. And I just love that. Manhood. Manhood exhibited on the street, men buying tasmac, drinking, holding hands tenderly in a tic-tac-toe of life with their friends in a square in Lungi, touching different parts of the loved friends' bodies to not lose contact with their hearts. Squalid dogs and holy cows watching envious from the road, except the astounded dog who could no longer walk. Passerby tourists watching envious from their cars. Intimacy, la intimidad, a difficult product to export. Feminine manhood, not yet patented by the West. Outside the stadiums, my eyes skip the heartbeat. My humanity is in diapers in India, where people understand that to let you live and laugh is already an advantage. Quiero leer uno que tenga francés, ¿verdad? ¿Quieres que lea translation? He lets me do whatever I want. I'll read translanguaging first because it's a very important poem. It's the way we call what we used to call Spanglish, but Spanglish has a connotation that somehow we don't know the word. And I love translanguaging, translinguar, so much more because it's not that I don't know the word, it's that I prefer this word, right? Because I speak with my imagination, you stopped listening to me centuries ago. Porque hablo con mi imaginación y no mi lengua, me dejaste de escuchar hace siglos. Translanguaging is not Spanglish. Translenguar no es español, sino un carnaval de palabras florido, resonante en todos mis existentes lenguajes. It's not fully having to say the specific words university specialists would use to say the same thing I mean in all my languages. Déjame ser comprendido en formas que no habías imaginado, porque hablo con mi imaginación. Translenguar no es español únicamente, sino una lengua con pilón. No es tener las palabras específicas para decir lo mismo que te quiero decir en mis lenguas bajas. En algún momento marginales, pochas, cortadas con los dientes, pero que sin embargo pegan su chicle en el universo. Las palabras que no sé tienen color en otra lengua, colores semióticos, colores feudales, colores ambientales, colores maternales. Si te digo, ok, es porque mi corazón estuvo en África. Jazz, jam, merengue y mojo colorean mi espíritu en África occidental y me enseñaron a comer serpiente y adorarla a la vez. Si te digo mis placeres, jambo, mambo, gambo, marimba, es porque la música de África pasó de los huesos a la lengua y contaminó mi espíritu políglota. El Swahili llegó en un safari de palabras, en mi profundo carnaval de sentimientos. Swahili arrived in a safari of words in my deep carnival of senses. La palabra okay, the word okay is from Africa. You do know that. So that's why the poem. We speak it everywhere. Ay, no sé qué leer. There's one about the migrant, Hum Pedro Hum, or the Huehuecoyotl, Coyotl, or the Xochiquetzal. Es difícil escoger. Xochiquetzal, okay. Este es mi líder. Xochiquetzal, goddess of sensuality, feasting, craftsmanship, among other pleasures, patron of weavers, embroiderers, silversmiths, and sculptors. Xochiquetzal, we who invented private kitchens to cook alone, to die in solitude, need you. We do. We who cook for one and share with none. We who progress by destroying. We who shop for food begrudgingly or as a pastime. We who do not cultivate vegetable, fruit, and root gardens and know not the joy of eating flowers, selling at the mercado, coloring our faces and bodies, envision musical and sensual futurisms. We who collect pots and pans we might never use and forego nixtamal daily for hamburger buns made last year. We who recycle clothes instead of gifting them, who waste our love-making cadences on ourselves frivolously and use our nails as blank screens instead of tools. Bless you. These days, you would know us all broken, materialistic, brute, lazy, ignorant, and yet we weave food into love. That is our festive weave, our satisfaction whole, enjoying the world you created. To remember a world you navigated in your colorful quetzal feathers. Our quest is in fact a feather we can fill with ink.
So yeah, the last few poems took us around the world. So I have a friend who teaches at Fresno State. He's a Stanford grad as well. It's Patrick Fontes, and he wrote a short story wherein he succeeds very well in school and he's immediately accused of cheating. And I think we all have this kind of story where we excel and we are punished for it. Now he's writing this in Fresno, and so there it's very stark and very obvious. The schools are just he's writing this in the 70s, schools are just being integrated. And you know, if he's smart, that means someone's nephew's not gonna get to be the town dentist, right? Somebody's nephew's not gonna be the lawyer, someone's there. So he has to be suppressed. He has to work the field, and this cannot happen. It's obvious in Fresno. In a bigger city, it becomes a lot less obvious, but that same dynamic exists. Our intelligence must be questioned in this country because we are here to be the beasts of burden. It's just clear. Now, I, like you, don't just feel like lamenting something. You know, I want this to be alleviated. I want to win. I don't want to just have the moral high ground. It's right. And I think for those of us who are, you know, who have the grand privilege of being professional intellectuals, I think the strategy is that we need to go abroad and create as many international connections as we can in order to grab Mexico City, to grab Rome, to grab Paris, to grab a hold of Berlin and smack these bastards on the head with it. And that's the only that's the way forward. I mean, that's the practical way forward. I mean, the work we're doing with Alfonso, the work we're doing, and the work I'm doing, and some of the work I'm doing, and the work I'm doing all over the place, it's not just because it's great to be international, it's great to have a worldwide perspective, yes, of course. But it's also practical for me here in Los Angeles, for me here in the United States, and I think you're in a similar position. That going abroad becomes our shield against these bastards here. I mean, what do you think?
Absolutely, and I am so grateful for all your work. Matt got all these awards in Europe, that you don't get here. Because of course, the people who are oppressed oppress, right? And it's hard for them. It's hard for them to look up when they've never been celebrated, right? And my high school counselor suffered tremendously. He was a white man. He dedicated his life. Had been an orphan and dedicated his life. Mike Sullivan is his name, to sending the children of migrant farm workers to private institutions because he knew they could give us the scholarships we needed, right? And he helped us through the whole process. But the Board of Education was constantly after him, and they finally got rid of him. Why? You said it astutely, because the Martinellis were not getting into, all the schools I was getting into, right? And they were very upset about that, right? That the child of the farm worker alcoholic would end up in Europe. But Ana Castillo, major Chicana author, she did not get her PhD in the United States. She was given a PhD in Germany. And now there's people every other year for 2 different groups. So it's every year. There's a conference in Spain that studies Chicano literature. Because we are the proactive, we are the most important, I would say, literature right now. But people don't know that.
Not the US.
No. And so you do have to go to Italy to get your Dante, Dante Alighieri. Matt has done tremendous things. You're going to Hungary next. You're going to all these places because that's the other thing. Y trabajador. And so you're taking all these skills that we learned, from our parents to be trabajadores. I'm editing books until 1 a.m. every day, because I believe in that work, and I'm not gonna rest. I'm gonna do as much as I can. And the other thing that's been turned around is that now if you produce a lot of books, well, you're not taking care of yourself. That's what they tell you, or you're making people feel bad because you're publishing too much. But you know what, Matt? We have to do what we want to do, and that is our goal. For me, my goal is to bring others to the light in their work. Because there's magnificent work, not only by Chicanos, but people of color, people that are constantly overlooked in this structurally racist country, a very racist country. And I hope that everybody that's listening to this realizes how important it is to do anti-Trump work right now.
Well, I just want to ask one final question, and then we'll have everyone have an opportunity to come talk to you and find out more about the book. But so yeah, you say it's extremely important at this moment. I mean, the fascism, latent in the Trump movement, and Greg Abbott in Texas, and in so many other figures. It's really at the moment. What do you think is the most urgent thing that people should be organizing around at this current time?
Well, the first thing is to not elect Trump. No, that's real. I'm really serious. I mean, that's a Hitler right there that we have, right? And the second thing is the environment. I'm on the board of Cascadia Poetics, a very important organization, because I believe that we as poets have to organize. I spent a lot of time in LA as a child, as my mother came and worked. When we were starving, she would come and work here from El Paso, from Juarez, at the sweatshops, and then we'd go back. And this LA is not, I mean, I'm so amazed by the heat, by the traffic, and how it's changed in my lifetime. And I'm really, estoy inquieta, estoy preocupada, I'm worried, because I don't believe we're doing everything we can to improve the environment. And I think that should be, which indigenous people have always done. When people tell us to recycle, we've been recycled all our lives, right? My mom always bought clothes thinking of all my cousins, who was gonna wear them next. So, we've always recycled, but that's not enough. We need to plant trees. We need to have gardens. Tenemos que tener jardines, ¿verdad? De comida. We have to use spaces to grow food, hierbitas. But mainly we have to take care of our water, right? So I think the environment is very important to me, Matt, because I want children to have beautiful parks and green spaces, and it's so very hot now, and I'm afraid we're starting to burn. And so I think that's the second thing for me after we get rid of Trump.
Like Donald Trump and plant a tree, here. All right. Thank you so much, Gabriela. Again, thank you again to Rearte for opening the doors. This is the first in a series, Notes from Chicano Underground. Very honored. The Mexican Cultural Institute of Los Angeles is also honored. The World Poetry Movement in the US is honored. El Martillo Press is honored. Very honored to be working with myself on in those capacities. But no, this has been a great conversation. Me? All right. I'll do a poem. There you go. Only for you. All right. Chicano poet sits at a desk and attempts to pen an anthem, a classic, a grand-sweeping epic of economics, demographics, the fear of a brown nation on a bronze continent, the motive engine at the beating heart of the Mexican question, Chicano condition, now somehow lost in a land of confusion, American neurosis, and Hispanic serving institution. Chicano poet sits at a desk and attempts to dive into ink, into parchment, open letter, an honest ledger of wins and losses, martyrs and marches, the mothers of East Los Angeles, crusades for justice, justice for janitors, the Justice 8, Los Siete, the La Raza, the Boulder 6, the Vasquez rocks, the silver dollar. A Chicano poet sits at a desk and attempts. Aranchero. Vaquero. Bandito. Coro Blanco, Bracero, Pachuco, Brown Beret, Cholo, Inmate, Puerto Pato, Loco, Pocho, Nosabo, Kid, Son, and Heir, to all I have seen, but taught to forget the crimes they commit that omit from the text. They changed the law when they stole the land. They taught our kids they held no claim to too much space, had to change their names to come a long way to nowhere. Saw a Chicano poet sit at a desk and attempt a hope, a dream, a prayer. I spend my days and nights scouring the archives of a lost tribe that sits here with their history and culture they could find. I called it home. May carry the movement in my heart. Wear my heart on my sleeve. Enshrine our heroes. These poems. La Corona. Acuna. De Yanuca. Caesar. Dolores, Gomez, Quiñones, The Plan, de Santa Barbara, San Diego, Carolina, La Tierra, Amaria, Tejarina, Alorista, LRU, UDP, CSO, ATM, a rifle, and a press, a pen, and a sword. Isa Flores, Daniel Gangi, Flores Magoni, Isa 500 years, and 500 more. Batista, Cortina, Jovito, Modesta, Morena, Barrera, Cabrera, Ayala, Carrasco, Cardona, Munoz, Muniz, Ruiz, La Raza, La Crónica, Regeneración, Saluche, Asigue, Asintli, Rodriguez. I return to the corn, I Corky, I walk in and I look the same, and I feel the same, and I have survived centuries of genocide and war, race politics, right religious, pseudo-intellectual academics, con a good name. It's a question, a movimiento, estudiantil, a Chicano, this land, and I shall endure. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, guys. All right, let's give a big round of applause to our hosts, Matt and Gabriella. Thank you guys for coming out. Thank you for this wonderful conversation. Please support Gabriella by purchasing her books, and please support the store. We also have books for sale, and if you want to make a donation, we also accept that. But please support Gabriella, and thank you so much. Feel free to hang out and talk to her and all that. Yeah, so thank you so much. Have a great night.
Les quiero decir que de ellos depende mi vida. Entonces, si pudieran